Yeah, Paul Vanderhooven issued Starship Troopers in, I think, 1987 or 88. And at the time, it was fairly provocative because of its, this neo-fascist view of a world nation state where only citizens could participate in the military civic affairs. Robert Heinlein, a famous science fiction author from the 20th century, wrote extensively about the roles of fascist and strong governments taking over, and in many cases the citizenry willingly giving away its rights for a perceived greater good. And then Heinlein, and then of course now Vanderhooven in his films, questions that. I find it because of the parallels to today, where we have a governing class in the federal and state level, many of whom currently, although we have a number of veterans running for higher office, most of the people running this country have waivers of service, had deferments for Vietnam. Okay, that's why Senator Quackenbush calls the president candidate bone spurs, because of Donald Trump's own Vietnam deferments for bone spurs, which he still is able to play golf and do other things. So there's a lot of you guys have been studying AP government. Now, did you guys study from colonial times forward? What was the time range of your class this year?
So really, it's just about the government. So the only history we really get into is why the Constitution was written. So it's not a lot of the history of government. It's just more of like the application and like how our government runs and works.
Okay. Well, to speak to that, one common thread I think we've seen has been the fact that we've always had a group of citizens that have been able to buy their way out of trouble. Whether it was in the Civil War, where you could buy a deferment for $300, and then one of my ancestors, Irish, just off the boat, would suddenly find themselves in a blue suit and a musket. And now, as we have today, we have a military that's all volunteer, and yet is constantly deployed overseas. It's no longer the how do I put this? When I was in high school in '79 and '80, going into the military for GI Bill was a no-brainer if you weren't going to a four-year university. But when I was, here's some comparisons. When I was at Eastern Washington University, full tuition, the highest I paid was $800 when I was in graduate school in '93. Okay, nowadays you guys are paying $18,000 for the four regionals. Okay, Eastern, Western, Central, and Evergreen, and then of course you're paying $22,000 to $24,000 for the UW and Washington State University. That's just tuition. That's before we talk about your books and all that. And meanwhile, the private schools, Gonzaga is close to 60, St. Martin's is close to 50, Seattle U is close to 60, and this is the last speech I give to each class when I leave. So why would you go into debt for $200,000 to be a teacher at $50,000 a year? Why? Speaks a lot about our society. We talk about how important you are and how you are our future and everything else, and then we take away your ability to earn a living unless you get into drug dealing now. The economics of higher education is a frightening thing, and I teach at St. Martin's, and I taught at South Puget Sound. So it's you guys are all now on. You all have your acceptance packages now, right? So you all know where you're going. How many going to UW, for example? Wazoo?
A lot of decisions are still.
Really? You guys are still on the bubble, waiting?
A lot of schools have said April 1st.
Oh man, really? What's the
bummer? Yeah.
Is it the financial aid package that you have to sweat out, or is it literally they're just holding your acceptance letters until April Fool's Day?
Both, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's
that's rough. I mean, you guys are going to be out of school by the end of May, pretty much, but for whatever testing you're going to do.
Yeah.
You guys got like 7-8 weeks of school left. I mean.
No. We get out in the middle of June. June 18th is when we graduate.
Oh, okay. Well, that's 2 months. Okay.
Yeah, it's a little long.
So how many of you want to go to UW?
I'm thinking about it.
Anyone else? Show of hands. UW, anybody?
Who's going to UW or wants to go?
Seattle U? Seattle University, Wazoo, out of state, bigger schools like Stanford, Yale, or George's embalming at Clown College.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of did you guys walk out today?
Yeah, we did. We were going to ask you about that. So what are your thoughts on the walkout? Like, how effective is it? And if not, like, what would you say would be a better option?
That's a good question. I'll tell you what I know, because I was at home I work out of my house, so I have a home office. So this morning I'm basically doing three things. I was doing my taxes because I haven't started them yet, and Session does that. I was actually watching the network and news via computer and the TV, and then I was going to put my thoughts together for this outfit. Nationally, when you go home and if you watch the national news, the student walkouts will be your lead story. In Seattle, what you're going to see is the thousands of kids who did the walkout from their high schools to the University of Washington main campus. Now, for you guys, that's like a 8 or 9 mile hike. It would be a little tough to do. Longer, maybe. How far is it from Kirkland to Seattle if you walked around Lake Washington? What, 12?
Walking, I have no idea.
15 miles.
Yeah, something like that.
That's a bit of a chore, even for a good cause. But no, I think the national walkout, by the fact that you were getting counters from a variety of people saying you should do the national step up and talk to a bullied victim, tells you that the significance of the event got a lot of people's attention. Because, and then of course, you had a school resource officer in Florida, California. This guy carries a weapon for a living. He discharged his weapon in the class by accident and then wounded one of his students in the neck with bullet fragments. That was yesterday. So that whole paradigm of arming teachers versus, maybe approaching the accessibility of weapons to younger people, that's still like an open question debate. Personally, I don't own a gun. I've used weapons. I was in the Army, this 1979 to 86 as a reservist. So I've fired a 45 caliber ACP. I've fired 30 cal, 50 cal grenade launchers. Some of this stuff, on I-5, I wouldn't mind having. A grenade launcher could solve a lot of problems, in an HOV lane. That being said, I don't own a gun because I don't want the responsibility of killing somebody. Because I was trained that if you point a gun at somebody, central cup and saucer, central body mass, your job with a gun is to kill people. I do not understand the value of having infantry assault weapons available to civilians. To me, it's like, why? Why, unless you're a collector of muskets and you're one of these guys who's like a recreator and you have a closet full of colonial, Civil War, hell, Nazi uniforms, and you want the weapons to match, fine. You can get non-firing replicas, and you can run around in a German accent saying bang bang and do the same thing. But for some reason, this country has embraced, and I actually should have gone and dug up the Supreme Court decisions, where somewhere in the early 1900s, the Supreme Court decided that the first clause of the Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia, didn't count, and the second clause, that the access to weapons, firearms, shall not be unimpaired. But remember, the Second Amendment was designed in response to the forceful British quartering of troops in people's homes. So that's the purpose of it. Despite that, when you look at the government history of gun control, we passed a Gun Control Act in 1968. We passed the Brady Bill in 1991. We've registered handguns by states for the better part of 75 years. People seem to understand that buying a gun is a serious bit of business, and generally speaking, the general population has not stopped buying guns. In fact, purchases continue at a steady pace. So the debate on gun control and school safety are two different arguments, okay? Gun control acts as controlling the universe of weapons available to the civilian population. School safety is the same safety as we look at in airports, as we look at concert venues and other places. In other schools, they do have metal detectors at every door, and you have to go through a metal detector. With cell phones, in theory, every student can be LoJacked. I mean, we have software to track you everywhere you go in this country, and we just don't talk about it. In Britain, for example, they have security cameras all over the place, and you can be tracked. And if any of you watch the Bourne movies, the Jason Bourne movies, do you ever notice that the CIA has all these camera feeds wherever this guy's going? It already exists. So when we talk about the rights that the founders gave us, okay, freedom of assembly, freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from not having the government take our property, the Fifth Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, due process, the 14th Amendment, expanded due process, 13th Amendment, ending slavery. When you look at the amendments to the Constitution and the Constitution, you see that we are a nation of individuals. And sometimes, like right now, individual rights actually get in the way of governance. So what you're seeing from the right side of the ball, in my opinion, is a move towards a more authoritarian model of governance. And what you see from the left side, whether it's the Democrats or Bernie Sanders, spoiler, Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, okay? He caucuses. Angus King from Maine is not a Democrat. They caucus with the Democratic Conference, but they are both independents. But the funny thing about Bernie and his Democrat Party is that Bernie has exposed the schism between the Democrats of the JFK through RFK through McGovern up to Bill Clinton era of Democrats, and a really solid group of people that backed Hillary Clinton, and they're not all women, by the way, a lot of party professionals and serious people in labor. And then you guys, your age group, 18 to 35, who viewed their political instincts through an economic lens, the one percenters. And the Democrat Party was originally a huge umbrella that could take all these competing interests and forge them into a vision for helping people. The Republican Party historically was pretty much straightforward, middle class, bankers, business people, and the wealthy who forged a vision of creating an economic climate that made everyone happy. Somewhere along the way, the Republican Party has been taken over by social conservatives and libertarians, for want of a better term. So you get Trump, okay? You get Pompeo, you get Rick Davis in Florida, you get Ted Cruz in Texas, right? And so the party, the party creates and drives these forces. And as you guys are going into your first election cycle as voting adults, something to keep in mind. The parties will have caucuses and conventions later this spring. You should attend. If you're going to stay local, you should think about being a PCO, Democrat or Republican, because the party, how it makes its decisions is by the building blocks of said party, which everybody in the Democratic convention who votes is a PCO or an elected official to the party, right? That's how it works. Democrats have a higher percentage of what they call superdelegates, which are elected officials, and then the Republicans have a lower count of superdelegates, but they have a much tighter control of their state party chairs. So these are the two competing systems, and because of I was talking to Dylan Doty, who's a fellow lobbyist colleague of mine and also teaches for Capital Classroom, and we were discussing the fact that when you talk to regular people, if I went out with you guys and we went to Starbucks somewhere and we just talked to ordinary folks, you're not going to find a lot of difference between men, women, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative on big issues like traffic sucks. I think the government's wasting my money. I really think that they're spending way too much time poking around in my health care and my health insurance, and they should really do something about the environment, because even I can tell, I think we would find the same responses. But we translate that into, they're going to take your guns. They're going to take away your birth control. They're going to destroy the environment. They're going to tax you out of your home. So the parties are pushing us apart and creating a bigger pool of independent and, for want of a better term, skeptical malcontents in the middle who are always trying to figure out the least of evils. And for People's Exhibit 1, I point to the 2016 presidential election.
Huh.
Neither, when you think about all the people that could have been president, okay, Democrat and Republican, excluding Bernie Sanders, if you go back to Martin O'Malley, from the governor of Maryland, if you go back to John Kasich, who, if there was a Republican president that I could live with, Kasich is like on the top tier. Lindsey Graham was running for president. I mean, we had all these smart people that Trump just blew up, like, you know, like one of the characters from Jeff Dunham's puppet show. You know, he blew him up, and we were left with Trump. And then with Hillary Clinton, we had this candidate who was inherently crippled by her friends, not by her enemies, by her friends. And so, and then you throw into that, you know, kind of the X factor. How much damage did the Russians do to our election? I mean, even I wrestle with that. The House Republicans issued their report this week. They closed their operations. They basically said there was no collusion. Keep in mind, collusion is not a legal term, okay? It's a political term. Collusion speaks to a collaboration between Trump and the Russians to influence the election. But to be honest, the KGB really doesn't want to be seen in the bright sunlight handing suitcases of cash to people. So that's not going to happen. The Trump people profited by Russian intervention. And there may be a whole bunch of stupid meetings between Trump campaign people, Manafort, for example, and Russian interests. And there may be some dirty, dark money that slid around. But, you know, that will require a lot more investigation. But I will tell you this, if you're a student of politics, and if you're a student of history, go back in time to the 1972 re-election campaign of Richard Nixon. And what you see are similar activities, such as dark money, third-party intervention, and a campaign designed to cripple first Hubert Humphrey, and then later George McGovern, as well as the senator from Maine who ran. Help me out here, David. 72, Mayor. Guy cried on camera at the end of his campaign.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what Google's for.
Yeah, that's what Google's for. Well, anyhow, what you have is, okay, 1972. Are you doing it? He's doing it. George McGovern. And then what happened with Thomas Eagleton when they found out he had taken, keep in mind, 1972, which is what, 46 years ago, right? 46, way older than Mr. Dawson and still younger than me because I'm 56. What we had is a guy, Thomas Eagleton, who was the vice presidential nominee, who actually had electroshock therapy and mental health counseling. And that was a big taboo in the 70s. You know, when you think about what we do to politicians, candidates, I'm on a rant here. Excuse me, guys. I'm about 15 minutes in on this one. So you can't have a divorce if you're a candidate for public office. You can't have a DUI if you're a candidate for public office. You can't have been sued for workplace if you're a candidate for public office. However, that doesn't stop those folks from being CEOs or from being, from being teachers, lawyers, judges, etc. We do have as a society a certain set of privacy expectations, which is if you didn't do it on the clock and if it didn't hurt people at work, then what business of it is of ours? And yet at the same time, both with the Me Too movement and also kind of the purity test we're using both on the right and the left, a lot of you that might want to run for office are probably saying, no, not going to do it. Don't want to put my family through that. And you guys maybe have totally clean histories. Nothing, you haven't had enough time on the planet to screw things up yet. You guys are still new at the whole adulting thing. But when you also look at the percentage of kids who come from divorced households, who come from foster homes, the next generation of leaders, your generation, is going to be a far more complex group of individuals with actually better real life experiences because of the fact that many of you have come through tough times. Many of you have come from other countries. Many of you have dealt with rather insidious discrimination based on the fact that a group of faceless people decided that you weren't cool enough. And you weren't the end thing. And keep in mind, you guys are kind of on the alpha side of the pyramid in high school because you're taking AB classes, you're university bound, you're middle class, you come from pretty good families, pretty good income. Yet you live in a high school where you've got people on free and reduced meals, you have people that are homeless, you have people that are in foster care that are coming to high school. And to me, stepping out in class is the first of many good things to do. And as I was talking to Mr. Dawson and David over via email, I'm really wanting to revisit the whole financial aid question with next year's government class. The class ran free AP, free SAT. The state would pay for your testing fees up to one basic AP plus one SAT, and then you'd have to negotiate out how many sections you could take. Because you guys, when I was in high school, we had AP at my high school, Gonzaga Prep. We had AP European, AP US History, AP English, AP Chemistry, AP Biology. That was it. I took AP History in English, Euro, and American. Got 3 5s. It bought me like a year of school at GU. It bought me a year of my government major at Eastern. It was fantastic. And that every student that's cracking, I think, a 3.2 should have a shot at the brass ring. That's my campaign speech to you, my population here. Questions? I've talked enough.
So actually, on that note of you mentioned, what you might talk to the Gov class about next year. Would you suggest trying the composting bill again?
Yes.
Like in tandem with, do the composting bill because it got close, and then also maybe pull up another bill so that it's more interesting, or just
that's a time management issue for Mr. Dawson and his class. No, seriously, if you guys broke into 3 teams of 5 and you wanted to run 3 bills, I'd do it. I get paid whether you run 1 or 10. So it would certainly be perplexing to the legislature if I had 1 AP class dropping multiple subject bills, 1 on higher education access, 1 on its composting bill, and everything else. The composting bill died, and I sent an email report to you guys. Not by anything you guys did wrong. It really was 98 people in the House that couldn't talk to each other, and they were on deadline. And then a very large, complicated wrongful death bill took out all 80 other bills that were up that afternoon, including yours. And you guys had moved up into the top 20 on the runway, which meant you were in position to pass. It is. You think it's bad. I'm sitting up at the rafters of the legislature, as Gail Tarleton said in an email, willing them to do the right thing. Like, come on! But that is the fate of this job. The fate of this job, you guys, it's a class project with a lifespan which ends when you guys are done with it. For guys like me, it literally, we are the Chicago Cubs of government. Wait till next year. We'll be back again. And if Dawson and the people, I don't know if you guys go out to the juniors that want to take AP Gov and you pitch this thing. I don't know what the buzz is about this class, but I'm really proud to do this. I love this part of it. I mean, tracking stuff and watching hearings on TVW and asking you to email questions is just too goddamn boring. Getting your hands dirty. I mean, do you want to, how do you learn how to cook? Do you read a cookbook?
I watch a lot of MasterChef.
Or you go to MasterChef, yeah. Or if you're really smart, you have a portable TV that you put in the kitchen and you try to replicate the recipe while watching, America's Test Kitchen or something else. You learn by doing, in my opinion. The biggest problem that you guys will have in college is that it's very difficult to get applicable skills unless the instructors, your faculty in college, give you something that you can use. Next question. You're at 6 minutes.
Is there anything specifically we should look out to be looking to do differently next year? Should we change the composting bill or should we stick with the same one?
This thing's skinny. This is a minimalist bill. You heard the complaints from the Republicans. It's not a mandate, but then that's like a briar patch argument, Brer Rabbit. Please, please, please don't make it a mandate because then I have a reason to vote against it. The first class that ran composting, the students in that class came up with a really cool argument. And it was the following. It says, if you want to change the world, you have to change the environment so that people want to make the decision. And when you go through life, all great social, back in the 70s, people were routinely throwing litter out of cars, okay? And we didn't clean up the highways until until the 60s and 70s. We didn't really go out. We didn't really recycle in this country till the 70s, and didn't really give it a vote till the 90s. So think about this. It can take 20 years to change established behaviors. One of the biggest social debates in the early 2000s was the banning of smoking from public places. I was a bartender and a server and a cook in my high school and college career. So I grew up with smokers putting their cigarette butts out in the food, and really gross stuff today that we would just be totally grossed out by. But that was normal. Now, of course, how many times you guys been driving a car going, you can smell the tobacco smoke through the intakes of your car. Your windows are closed and you're running AC. Or worse, you smell dank. You go, you're driving and smoking weed. Are you crazy? But that's the new normal, okay? That's the new normal. And so to change composting, you have to create a new normal. And the fact is that a variety of high schools in Washington are composting and doing what you guys are doing. And one of the things I need to research for next year's class, and things that I have to do better, is I have to give you guys a size of the universe of people already doing what this bill is. And since so many people are already doing it, why don't we get it statewide? So that's probably the thing that I have to work on, and that I hope answers the class question of what do you need to do better? And the answer is we need, to win this bar fight, we need more friends, we need more fighters, and we have to make it a cause. Next question. We're at 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
So this year, I had Senator Kuderer and Representative Goodman come in like November, December. Would you recommend me having them try to come in like May to start a bill for next year, or just wait till October, September of next year?
September is okay. The earlier in the school year, the better, because if we do this in May, it's the outgoing cadre of students.
Yeah.
And we do, one of the governing principles of what we've been doing in this class is we have the class decide what it wants to do. Not, although this year you got a composting bill and you were told, well, we've run this before, and you measured it and decided to go. I'm a big believer when I teach my class in political communications at St. Martin's. I do one project for them. I have them do presentational speeches on mandatory seizure of vehicles for DUI. But in that case, I give them the research packet. I give them the North Carolina statute that does that. I give you the Washington state statutes on DUI. I give you court cases. All right, off this block of data, you can do your job and get a B. But if you want to get an A, you guys have to start doing your own digging and dig further. And for the most part, I mean, you can see the metaphorical library dirt fly when these people suddenly realize not just the amount of data available for you as a student in government and poli-sci, but the quality and immediacy of the data that you can do. The things are awesome. Hey, you in the back, I'm looking at you. Are there any questions from the audience?
Oh, I actually have one.
Gavin?
Yeah.
Is there any update on the Indigenous Peoples Bill?
Let's see here. We have a couple things going on with Indigenous folks. We have a bill signing coming up for the Native American missing and murdered Native American study bill that went all the way through the process. Indigenous Peoples Day, I don't believe got out of the Senate because of the time management problems that they had this year. But I can, as part of my final report, you guys give me a shopping list and I'll go dig them out, or you can dig them out for yourself as well. But for my bill tracker for Colville, Indigenous People Day and other Indigenous bills did not clear the legislature. The Native American Woman Homicide Domestic Violence Study Bill did, and it's waiting the governor's signature.
All right.
Anyone else?
I've got so in terms of just in reference to the walkout today, some people just left school, went down to the front of the school to the street. We also had like a thing set up in the commons area, like the lunchroom, where it was the address of the office of Governor Inslee and some paper and some postage for people to write to him to express their desire for change. is that like, are those going to get read by him, or are those going to get read by a secretary, or
staff
Staff,
will
yeah,
review that.
sure.
And what they'll do is Scott Merriman, who runs the legislative policy shop for the governor, is a buddy of mine. One of his jobs is to take that type of material and condense it down into a one-pager with attachments, and then that's what the governor sees. So the governor will read the executive summary, and then he'll probably peruse letters and then respond individually if he sees them.
Cool.
School safety. This is a real opportunity for students and people under the age of 30 to intervene. And it's really important that we figure out how to, not just two things. One, getting you being taken seriously by decision makers, which is a challenge, obviously, because you guys are just kids. You don't even own guns. Versus the fact that you have to keep agitating. You have to keep poking the bear on this one, because it goes back, you have to change the environment. We went from banning gays from teaching and other jobs in the 1970s to gay marriage in the early 2000s. It took 40 years. Talk to people of color, particularly African Americans, and they will gently remind you that lynching has never gone away. So we can change the world. We've done it. We just have to figure out how to do it with bigger groups of people. And that, my friends, concludes today's rant and discussion. Take a moment of time, YouTube Starship Troopers. You don't have to watch the movie. Just watch the recruitment videos from the movie.
Thank you so much for everything, Mr. Moran. We really appreciate it. I think this, speak for everyone when we say this.
These thoughts, these notes really warmed my heart, guys. Thank you very much. I wish you the best and good luck and good hunting with your applications and other places. And, don't give up.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
You know what they say, a big part of life is just showing up, man.
Thank you
Go
so much
Kangas.
for everything.
All right. Bye.
Bye.